This week, the core value is educationally focused. I want to share a little bit more about what this value looks like and how we can ensure we can reflect it in the way that we engage with new students and their families. So the first thing you need to know is that you are a co-curricular educator. I'm not sure you've ever thought about that before or even know what that totally means. But as you think about the curricular at Calvin University, it's fairly self-explanatory. It involves the classes you go to, it involves the learning that's done within the four walls of a classroom and in labs and those kind of things. Co-curricular refers to those learning opportunities and environments that fall outside the four walls of a classroom. And so co-curricular really is this concept of the learning that a lot of college students do that aren't directly related to their academic learning and yet is still learning. And when you think about being an educator is how do you inform, teach, and challenge students to grow and develop in that area. And so really that's the hat that we want you to put on. How can you make sure that you become an educator as part of your role as an intern? And that's something we're going to ask you to do and do well. There's a couple things you need to think about in order to do that well. And the first one is you really need to focus on how students learn and great pedagogy. It needs to be your focus. So when you think about student learning, that's a really important part to think about who is your audience? What do you want them to learn? And when you think about teaching, what kind of styles of teaching can you do? Obviously, you can stand in front of someone or in front of a screen and talk at someone, or you can create interactive activities. There's lots of ways that you can facilitate student learning, and that's something we want you to be thinking about as a co-curricular educator. So a few things that I think are important to think about in your new role as a co-curricular educator. The first one is that you need to think about the different learning styles that students have as they enter the institution. So some of us are very visual in the way that we learn, and so part of our programming should reflect that way of learning for students. So a lot of PowerPoints or videos, stuff that engages people as they watch it. Some people are auditory learners where they need to listen to it and have that repeated. There's kinesthetic learning, which are people that actually want hands-on stuff and actually physically be able to touch stuff. So I think we're tempted to teach the way we learn, and I think it's as important as a co-curricular educator is don't just focus on the way you learn and therefore teach that way, but teach to different learning styles and how critical that can be. I think creativity lends this itself. I think you really do need to, as you're developing programming and lessoning, to be really creative. If you're focused on one thing for too long, it's just not going to really resonate or connect to your audience. So how can you be creative? How can you switch things up every 5 to 6 minutes so people can learn and understand and gain their attention without having to lose it? Creating learning objectives is going to be a big part of what you do. So we have learning objectives, and we'll talk about that for new students. What are the goals? What do we want them to learn? But for your particular program, we're going to ask you to create SWABATs. Students will be able to ... at the end of your session. So if you're working on a program, students will be able to do what? And we want you to articulate those goals as you're planning so that we know at the end of the session that they're going to learn these 3 particular skills or understanding or mindsets. And the last thing is lesson plan. We're going to make you create lesson plans, and that's part of being a great co-curricular educator is that you are going to basically have a plan on how you're going to teach, and you're going to, whether that's doing student breakout sessions and you're working individual students, you'll create a lesson plan on how you're going to run that session. For your training of your orientation assistants or orientation leaders, you're going to create lesson plans on those trainings. And this is a big part of what it means to be a co-curricular educator. So for the homework, we're going to have you reflect a little bit on what you learned in your orientation program, or maybe in some cases what you didn't learn and that you wish that you did. And so I'd like you to reflect a little bit on your own orientation experience and think about the programming you went to, the experiences that you had. What do you think you learned during your Passport if you went to one of those, during IP if you attended that, during Quest that you attended that, the different orientation programs you went to? What did you learn? And in some ways, What didn't you learn in those sessions that maybe you wish that you did? And I'd love for talk about that on our one-on-one. So please take a few minutes in your leadership journal and reflect on those experiences. Have a great one.